Le prochain chef, Andrew Scheer.
Next leader, Andrew Scheer.
I do think the government will benefit and the province will benefit with a new voice and a new style, maybe some new energy.
So, thank you. I guess I'll never see any of you ever again.
Just a few of the big leadership changes in Canadian politics in the past year. Welcome back to CBC News Network and our last Sunday Scrum of 2017. Before the break, we took a look at the issues that got people talking this year. Now let's focus on the people. Both the big names that dominated the headlines and the important figures that may have slipped through the crack. Susan Riley, John Ibbitson are in Ottawa, and Vicky Mochama in Toronto. So let's get right to it. Vicky, who is your person of the year in Canadian politics and why?
My person of the year in Canadian politics is almost always going to be Dr. Cindy Blackstock. She is a tireless advocate for First Nations children and for the government to step up and fulfill its responsibilities and its human rights obligations in ensuring that First Nations education is fully funded. And she does this with a lot of heart, and she's a very sweet and compassionate woman as well. But, you know, when it comes to having the receipts on how the government continues to fail Indigenous children, Cindy Blackstock has them.
Susan?
That was my pick too, Vicky. I totally agree. She's been fighting since 2007 to ensure that Indigenous children get the same access to health and social services as other Canadian children. She's been backed up by the Canadian Human Rights Board and also Commission and also by the Tribunal, fought by the Liberal, first the Conservative government and then the Liberal government all the way. And finally, it looks like we're getting resolution. Jane Philpott, the new minister in charge of this area, has dropped the federal government fight against this provision, and there's a big meeting planned, I guess, for next month in which they're going to start figuring out how to bring Indigenous children up to the same standard as everybody else in the country. This is largely, if not solely, due to Cindy Blackstock's incredible devotion and energy and persuasive powers.
John, I think you have a different choice.
I do. I'm going to go with Garnet Jennis, the young 30-year-old Edmonton Conservative MP. The Conservatives are one of the two governing parties in this country, so all Canadians need to be concerned about its health. And you can feel good about the health of the Conservative Party when you look at this young MP. He is, by the way, someone who was voted Parliamentarian of the Year for Maclean's magazine by other parliamentarians. So he's well known and well liked up on the Hill. The NDP says, some NDP MPs have joked that he's, in terms of social policy, he's a part-time New Democrat. By the way, he delivered with his wife their second son during an unexpected childbirth a couple of years ago. I've talked with him. He is smart. He is sound on policy. He's a very nice guy. And I think if you look at people like this young Edmonton MP, you can feel good about the future of the Conservative Party going forward.
Okay, and now I try not to weigh in, of course, because I leave it up to my betters, but I do have a nominee this year in this department, and it's two people, and it's Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, of course, sort of an honorary Canadian, having lived here for 7 years, and I'll tell you why. She is, of course, mixed race. She is going to speak to the Britain of today, as we saw anyone who watched that very touching Grenfell Tower memorial service about the Muslim child choir and the steel pan playing Hallelujah. And they referenced this in their first interview when their engagement was officially announced, the Commonwealth. 52 countries around the world. This has been the Queen's passion throughout her whole life, and these two, based on the longevity of the royal family, could very well be in the public sphere for the next half century or more, going around the world to the developing world and speaking with someone like her who is poised and, again, has the mixed race card. It is going to be interesting. So not so much this year. It was just an engagement, but looking forward, that's my pick as well. So I don't weigh in often, but there you have it. Let's move to those who had an important influence on the events of this year and perhaps didn't receive the recognition they deserved. Vicky, who's your pick?
I'm going to pick someone who I think got a fair amount of attention, but I can never shout out her enough. That would be, for me, the Member of Parliament's Lena Cesar-Chavannes, who represents Whitby. She's an incredible woman and an incredible advocate for her constituents, but also for young women and girls. And so in September, she made a speech in the House, talking about what it's like to be a young woman, to face body shaming. And for me, she did it while, representing what it means to be a black woman. And there are not that many black women in Canadian politics, period. And there are very few who are actually are willing to speak to our experiences, and to ensure that not only do they speak to our experiences, but ensure that politicians and policymakers know what that is and have some plan to deal with it. And so I think she's an incredible person. She also recently posted a Facebook note talking about how, even though she's a member of Parliament, she constantly faces daily racist microaggressions. And these are the things that, you should think that somebody at her status doesn't have to deal with anymore, but she's still willing to talk about it. And being on the Hill and being in the Liberal Party, you can get talked out of ever speaking again, so that she still continues to have personality and wit and charm and to still represent all her communities. I think that's fantastic, and I think we should have more of those politicians as opposed to less.
Yeah, and anyone who hasn't read into her description of the microaggressions she suffers almost on a daily basis, it's frightening stuff to read, and every Canadian should read that. John, who would your pick be?
Another young woman, Lindsay Shepherd, who we have heard a lot about. She was the young teaching assistant at Laurier University who was called on the carpet for showing a video of Jordan Peterson, and it was the recording of that disciplinary hearing that went viral and that really exploded the whole issue of the debate that's occurring within the social sciences and humanities on the right of freedom of expression, the right of freedom of research versus the right of protection, the right to safe spaces, the right not to be subject to aggression. This is a virulent debate that's happening on university campuses across the country. Some of us have written about it in the past, but it has to be said, no matter where you are in this debate, it was Ms. Shepherd and that tape that blew this entire issue open and made it part of the national discourse. And for that, she deserves great credit.
I have to disagree. I think that she is someone that exists, and I think a lot of people responded to her for the same reasons they tend to respond to things, which is that she's a young, crying white girl. But there are lots of moments in which the academic freedom conversation could have been had and has been skipped over serially, and I don't think that she's the appropriate person to have launched this conversation, because as it turns out, she leans hard right in some of her choices.
Well, whether you like where she leans or not, we're having this debate here on this show now, and we're having it because of Ms. Shepherd.
Susan?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. She had a certain clarity, and I agree. The initial, I agree. I think she should have had the right to show what she showed to her class, but discuss it within the class. That being said, I do think she's being co-opted, or at least. I don't know where she started on the ideological spectrum. She says she was on the left, but she's definitely being used now by the right.
So, Susan, who would your pick be then?
Well, mine's so completely understated. I think that was the understated is a Liberal MP called Arnold Chang, who tragically died at the age of 50 in September, and until then was not really widely known. But the tributes that emerged after his death suggest an incredibly engaging, hardworking, nonpartisan, very well-respected member of Parliament. In a sense, I'm not going to say the majority, but there are a lot of MPs like that aren't hard-edged and hateful. We tend to see the ones who are hard-edged and hateful. He worked across party lines, and he was very greatly missed. His wife, Jean Yip, has just been elected to Scarborough-Agincourt to replace him in the Commons. But I didn't know anything about him before all this happened, and I thought, wow, there's another anonymous voice, somebody quietly doing good.
Well, up next, the Trump effect on Canada. But first, let's hear from Susan's pick for the year's most underrated parliamentarian of the year. Arnold Chan died this past year at the age of 50. And as we mentioned, his wife, Jean Yip, won the seat this past week. Well, Chan rose in the House just a couple of months before losing his fight to cancer, and he delivered this exhortation to his colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Have a listen.
What we're doing right now, when we listen to one another, despite our strong differences. That's when democracy really happens. That's the challenge that's going on around the world right now. No one's listening. Everyone's just talking at one another. We have to listen to each other. And in so doing, we make this place a stronger place.